Right now, without realizing it, your brain is scanning. Not for food, not for danger, for bad news. Every headline that mentions a disaster, every notification about a tragedy, every conversation about something going wrong, your brain flags it faster, holds it longer, and replays it more often than anything good that happened today. And here's the part nobody tells you. That's not a flaw. That's the system working exactly as designed. The problem is the world it was designed for no longer exists. This has a name. Psychologists call it negativity bias, and it's not a personality flaw or a habit you picked up from doom scrolling. It's wired into the oldest parts of your brain, the parts that kept your ancestors alive long before phones, before news cycles, before any of this existed. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where it lives in your brain, why it's getting stronger instead of weaker, and what the research says actually works to loosen its grip. Not think positive, something that actually holds up under scrutiny. Here's what's happening underneath the surface. Deep in your brain sits a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Its job is threat detection, and it's fast, faster than your conscious thought, faster than your ability to reason about what you're seeing. Researchers have tracked this directly using something called event-related brain potentials, measuring electrical activity in the brain within milliseconds of seeing an image. Negative images consistently produce a larger, faster spike than positive or neutral ones, even when the images are matched for intensity. Your brain isn't waiting to decide if something matters. It's already decided before the thinking part of you catches up. This shows up in behavior too. Give someone a screen with a grid of faces, mostly neutral, one angry, and they'll find the angry face faster than they'd find a single happy face in the same grid. It's called the anger superiority effect, and it's been replicated across dozens of studies. Your visual system is built to pull threat out of a crowd before anything else, and once something is tagged as a threat, it doesn't just get noticed first, it gets remembered better. Emotional memory researchers have shown that negative events activate stronger memory consolidation than neutral or even positive ones of similar significance. So the bad news doesn't just win your attention in the moment, it wins a permanent seat in your memory, while the good news from the same day quietly fades. None of this is random. It's the product of an evolutionary trait that made perfect sense for most of human history. Imagine an early human walking through tall grass and hearing a rustle. There are two possible mistakes. Mistake one, it's just the wind, but you treat it like a predator. You waste a few seconds of fear, maybe your heart rate spikes, nothing happens, you move on. Mistake two, it's actually a predator, but you treat it like the wind. You don't survive long enough to make the mistake twice. Evolution doesn't optimize for accuracy, it optimizes for survival. And when one type of error costs you your life and the other costs you a moment of unnecessary fear, the brain that survives is the brain that's willing to make 1,000 false alarms to avoid missing one real threat. So your ancestors who were quicker to notice danger, slower to dismiss it, and more likely to remember it vividly were, on average, more likely to survive and pass that wiring forward. Generation after generation, that bias got reinforced, not because it made anyone happy, but because it kept them alive long enough to have children who inherited the same jumpy, vigilant nervous system. That's the part most people miss. Negativity bias isn't a bug in human psychology. It's a feature that was selected for ruthlessly over hundreds of thousands of years. The version of you reading this sentence right now exists, in part because your ancestors' brains were really, really good at overreacting to bad news. This isn't just theory. Researchers have tested it directly, and the results are remarkably consistent. In one well-known study, participants were given a free choice between reading positive news stories or negative ones. Across age groups, across countries, across political leanings, people consistently gravitated toward the negative stories, even when they reported afterward that they would have preferred to read something uplifting. There's a gap between what people say they want and what their attention actually does, and negativity bias lives squarely in that gap.
Other researchers have tracked eye movement directly. When people are shown a positive and a negative news photo side by side, their eyes move to the negative one first, linger there longer, and they recall details from it more accurately afterward. Nobody told them to look there. Their visual attention made the decision before they were even aware a decision had been made, and this pattern holds up across an enormous range of contexts, not just news. It shows up in how people remember relationships, where a single harsh comment from a partner outweighs days of kindness in someone's overall impression. It shows up in how people rate experiences, where one bad moment can define an entire vacation. Psychologists sometimes summarize this with a simple rule: bad is stronger than good. It's one of the most replicated findings in social psychology, and it applies almost everywhere human judgment shows up. Here's where this stops being just an interesting fact about your brain and starts being something that actually shapes your daily life. For most of human history, negativity bias had almost nothing to feed on. A village might hear genuinely threatening news once every few weeks: a bad harvest, a conflict nearby, an illness moving through. Your ancestors' threat detection system evolved to handle rare, occasional spikes of bad news, with long stretches of calm in between. That environment doesn't exist anymore. You now carry a device that can deliver an almost unlimited stream of threatening information, 24 hours a day, curated by systems that have one job: keep you watching. And those systems figured out the same lesson newspaper editors learned a century ago with the phrase, "If it bleeds, it leads." Negative headlines get more clicks, outrage gets more shares. Fear keeps people scrolling longer than calm reassurance ever could. This isn't a conspiracy. It's optimization. Algorithms test thousands of variations of content and learn very quickly which version keeps your eyes on the screen the longest. And because your amygdala is wired to prioritize threatening information above almost everything else, the algorithm doesn't need to understand psychology. It just needs to notice that negative content performs better and feed you more of it. The machine and your nervous system end up working toward the exact same outcome, for completely different reasons. The result is that you're no longer encountering bad news the way your ancestors did. Rare, spaced out, mostly local. You're encountering a constant, global, algorithmically optimized stream of it, and your threat detection system has no built-in mechanism to tell the difference between a real, proximate danger and a tragedy happening on the other side of the planet that has zero practical relevance to your life today. To your amygdala, it's all just threat, and it all gets the same urgent, memorable treatment. This has consequences, and they're not small. Researchers studying media consumption have found a consistent relationship between heavy exposure to negative news and increased anxiety, and in some studies, symptoms resembling those seen after direct exposure to traumatic events, even though the person consuming the news experienced nothing firsthand. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish between a threat you witnessed and a threat you watched repeatedly on a screen. The nervous system response can look remarkably similar. There's also a distortion effect on how you see the world. If your information diet is mostly negative, your mental model of reality starts skewing negative too, even when the actual data doesn't support it. This is sometimes called mean world syndrome. The more violent or threatening content someone consumes, the more they tend to overestimate how dangerous and hostile the real world actually is, compared to people with the exact same circumstances who simply consume less of it. And there's a quieter cost too, one that's harder to measure but easy to recognize once you notice it. Constant exposure to threat-flagged information keeps your nervous system in a low-grade state of vigilance. You're not relaxed, you're not quite anxious either, you're just primed, waiting for the next piece of bad news because your brain has learned that's usually what's coming next. That state is exhausting to sustain, and most people sustain it for hours every single day without ever realizing that's what's happening or that it's optional. So what do you actually do with this? knowing your brain is never going to stop being wired this way? The first thing that helps is simply naming it in the moment. Research on emotional regulation consistently shows that recognizing a reaction as it's happening, this is my negativity bias firing, not necessarily an accurate read on how dangerous this actually is, reduces the grip that reaction has on you. You're not fighting your amygdala. You're just giving your slower, more rational brain a chance to catch up before you act on the alarm. Second, deliberate exposure to positive and neutral information matters more than people think. Because negative information has a natural advantage in your attention and memory, it takes active effort to keep your overall picture balanced. This doesn't mean avoiding real news or pretending problems don't exist. It means making sure your input isn't entirely lopsided toward threat, because if it is, your sense of reality will be too. Third, and probably most practically, set boundaries around the algorithmic feeds specifically, since they're the ones engineered to exploit this bias most efficiently. The news itself isn't the enemy. A feed optimized to maximize your time on an app using your own ancient threat detection system against you is a fundamentally different thing than a human deciding, with intention, what's actually worth knowing about today. None of this turns off negativity bias. You can't opt out of being human. But you can stop being unconsciously steered by a mechanism that was built for a world that no longer exists. So no, you're not broken, and you're not weak for feeling overwhelmed by the news. You're running ancient survival software on a modern information environment it was never designed to handle. The fix isn't forcing yourself to feel happier or pretending bad things don't happen. It's recognizing the pull the moment it starts, so you get to choose your response instead of running on autopilot, the same autopilot that's been running since long before you were born. If this changed how you think about your own newsfeed, you'll probably want the next video too, because negativity bias is only half the story.